All right, folks, how you doing tonight? And welcome to another edition of the what WTF Fantasy Football Show. I want to say that word so bad, but I can't do it on the radio, so I won't do it. No Tony Cincotta tonight, so I will be your host. And of course, as always, I am joined by Mr. Brian Drake. Brian, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing fantastic. It's about 30 degrees here in Syracuse, New York. So I'm glad I put a pool in last week. I'm feeling great.
There you go. Pretty soon you'll be able to ice skate, so no worries. We do have a special guest to join us tonight. Actually, Brian's co-host on Tuesday nights for their show, and that's Mr. Dwayne McFarland. Dwayne, how you doing tonight?
Doing good, Jim. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate you guys.
Hey, no problem, no problem. Always love to have another stat guy on so they can prove me wrong every time I open my mouth. I'm good with that. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you, where they can find you? I know you're relatively new to Twitter and stuff, so give them a little background on what Dwayne brings.
Yeah, so like you said, I mean, I am more of a stat guy, but I love watching the games too. So I've been playing.
Hey, finally, a stat guy who actually watches games. Okay, you're already good in my book. Good. I'm okay with that.
I watch all of them. So I actually do work for at Fighting Chance Fantasy. I write one column a week. It's the Late Week Hustle. I joined Brian on Tuesday nights for the Tuesday Night Hustle. And then I also do work for Matt Waldman at the Matt Waldman RSP. So
I love Matt Waldman. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's awesome. And just like you guys, just love playing fantasy. Been playing a long time. Last year, I guess my biggest claim to fame is last year I missed first place in the Football Guys FFPC by 1.5 points. So from
nice.
down to it was 35 grand a second. So big drop.
Well, still nice output. Good job, man. That's absolutely good. Hey, look, we play this game for fun, but it's always nice to win a little money on the way. There's no doubt about it. It's a hard industry to actually make money at, so you got to take whatever you can get. And if it's from playing, then so much the better. We got a bunch of topics to get into tonight, so why don't we just jump right in? First is going to be our mid-season awards. Just getting into week 7 here, basically halfway through the season. And we're going to start with, and I'm going to start with you, Brian. Who is your biggest fantasy surprise through 6 weeks?
Well, I really wanted to kind of go something different here. And the biggest surprise, I don't want to just say like, oh, the guy you've never heard of who scored the most points. I wanted to say somebody who you might have actually drafted on your team, but they surprised you and they've elevated to a new level on your roster. So my choice is James White. James White is a guy who you probably picked to be, maybe a flex, but probably a bench guy. And if you look at what he's done this year so far, he's averaging 8.5 targets a game, 6 catches. He's averaging 78 yards a game, and he already has 5 touchdowns. So in a half-point PPR, he's guaranteed double digits every single week. And if you got that from a guy you probably drafted in the 9th or 10th round, you're sitting pretty, and it's covering up a lot of sins that you had from earlier busts in your draft.
Can't really argue with James White. He's having a career year right now. They're using him to death, and he is absolutely getting it done. And for the first time, and I don't remember how long, we actually have running backs in New England that we can count on from week to week. So definitely a nice step up from that offense. Usually this is an offense that we all try to stay away from their running backs. But now all of a sudden we have 2 really good, solid choices each and every week. Dwayne, who's your biggest surprise so far?
Actually, I think that was a really good one. I was actually leaning towards James White. I've got a buddy that's always talking about him. I'm like, man, he'll be fine for the first few weeks while Edelman's out, and then whatever, you move on. But yeah, White has been great. For me, it's honestly, and I know this is one that wasn't going super late in drafts or anything. I can't believe that Adam Thielen is the number 1 ranked wide receiver, and he's just doing it over and over every week. I mean, he's a guy I liked, but more or less I stayed away because I felt like between him and Diggs, I wouldn't be able to know who was going to be the best one each week. And man, with Kirk Cousins throwing it in the slot, with him getting good matchups every week, and then his game just continuing to blossom. I mean, I wish I owned him more. Like I said, I've got like 37 teams, and I think I owned Thielen 3 times. So that really sucks.
Oh, that does suck. Yeah, I love Thielen coming in. Look, I like Diggs. I think Diggs is an all-around better wide receiver, I believe. But with the injury history and, I just really thought Thielen working out of that slot with Cousins would be just a much better option after what we saw Cousins do with Jamison Crowder for the most part. So I'm with you there. I love Thielen this year, and I actually have him in quite a few more leagues than that. So I lucked out with him. But then again, of course, for every Adam Thielen I lucked out with, I'm getting kicked in the pants by Larry Fitzgerald or somebody like that. So, so I'm with you on that one. For me, I'm going to go with another wide receiver that, to me, has been one of the biggest fantasy surprises of the year, and that's Robert Woods. Everybody expected it once they brought in Cooks that Woods would basically take a third seat behind Cooks and Kupp, and and Woods is just laying it out there. I mean, so far in the season in PPR leagues, he's the number 8 wide receiver. He's 51 targets already, over 500 yards. He's just getting it done. 300-yard games. Last year at this time, he was the wide receiver 40, and he's just tearing up numbers that we've seen from him in the past. There was always flashes of him in Buffalo of what he could possibly do if he got more chances, and now we're finally seeing it. Any thoughts on him from you two?
I love Robert Woods. He's a guy I traded for in a few big leagues last week. And really, he's what we always go back to. I want good players in explosive offenses, and especially there with really good play callers. And I think as we move forward in fantasy, that's going to become something we look at more and more, is who's actually calling these plays. And I think the casual fan's going to kind of catch on more to that. And you can't have anyone better calling a play for you, than what Robert Woods has. So that's an excellent choice, and he's just going to continue to steamroll. Who knows how long Kupp's out for? If you've got Robert Woods, hang on to him. You're sitting on a top 5 receiver that you drafted in a double-digit round probably. That's awesome.
Yeah, Robert Woods, thankfully, for me not owning Adam Thielen, I own Robert Woods quite a bit. I'm with you, Brian. He's a guy that I loved, coming in. I didn't foresee, though, him being at like 28% of the target share versus, say a 20 and a 21 for Cooks and Kupp. Now, Cooks and Kupp have missed a little parts and pieces of different games, so that may even out a little bit more as the year goes. But I was just looking, here's Woods' target shares: 28, 29, 32, 17, 23, and 37. In an offense like that, you're gonna get top 6, top 8 wide receiver numbers every week if he's getting that kind of volume. So yeah, that's a great call by you, Jim.
Okay, cool. Well, then let's move on. And I will say this: I had another one prepared just in case one of you guys took Woods for me. So I'm going to give an honorable mention out there to Eric Ebron. There is so much distaste in people's mouths, fantasy owners' mouths, for Eric Ebron because he just never quite lived up to the hype. Even when Doyle went down, they still wasn't sure that he would take the role and run with it. And he's had a very good start to the season. Do you think, and I'll ask you this, Dwayne, first, do you think Eric Ebron can keep up the pace he has?
I don't think so when Doyle comes back, but I just don't know. I have no clue when that's going to be. Every week, we just hear Doyle hasn't practiced again today. So, but what I see with that team, I do believe that Ebron he's carved out more of a role now. The problem with Ty practiced in full today, right? So he's going to be their number 1 target. And when Doyle comes back, the problem for Ebron is that pushes him off the field. He's only going to be on the field in somewhere between 30 and 50% of the snaps. So, it'll just come down to how often they're having him out on the field when they're actually passing. So I think he'll still be sustainable as far as being a starting fantasy tight end because I think of what he's shown the team so far. I just think that he's going to come down from the high he's on right now because right now, he's being force-fed. He's seeing 8 to 10 targets pretty much every week. That's probably going to come down, more into like 6 to 8 range. So, he'll still be able to do damage with that, especially like in tight end premium leagues. But I think the return of Doyle will hurt. And I think anyone that can get Doyle right now for cheap, or if he's free, or if he's out there for nothing, it's a great guy to stash.
Well, we got that coming up later. We got that coming up later.
Sorry. My first time on this one.
No worries, Dwayne. We're all about having fun here, so don't even sweat it. No big rules or anything. We just talk for the most part. So no worries. Okay, let's move on to the next one. The next one, I tried to look for somebody that wasn't obvious, and it just doesn't work. But I'll go to you first, Dwayne, on this one. Who's your fantasy MVP so far?
My fantasy MVP. Well, honestly, like what I like to do is I look at a lot of the teams, that I drafted because I do so many, and I look at, okay, who's the guy that's literally, if he's on my team, I'm pretty much winning all the way around. And for me, and I never go this way, but I mean, I literally was drafting quarterbacks after kickers and defenses in some drafts this year. But I drafted Pat Mahomes a ton in 20 round drafts where I was getting him in round 12, 14, 15. And I mean, on those teams where I have him, especially if I paired him up with Tyreek or Kelsey was even better. I mean, the guy's carrying me through some of the injuries that I've had. I mean, I never go quarterback, but Mahomes has just been amazing. And where you got him for, you got him 50%, their guys are where they were going in the league. You got guys in your league taking Rodgers in 5, and, they turn around and take Russell Wilson in 6, and you're turning around getting really the best guy, and you get him in round 14. So not normally one that comes to mind quarterback, but this year it is.
How about you, Brian?
I mean, it's easy to say Todd Gurley, and that's the obvious answer. But if we want to dig a little deeper to kind of the average team and who's really winning your league and who's winning for you and your team, my choice was James Conner. This is a guy you either picked up on waivers after week 1 or you drafted as a handcuff. And right now in a half-point PPR, he's RB4. He's averaging 21 points per game in a half-point PPR, 7 touchdowns, and he's doing a lot of work as a receiver. He's getting 35 targets. He's got 26 receptions. He's Mr. Everything. He's basically just Le'Veon Bell 2.0 because Le'Veon Bell obviously doesn't want to show up and get paid. So I think if you have James Conner, either as a Bell owner or someone was very smart in drafting him, he is without question your MVP. He's giving you just mind-blowing numbers here. It might not last, but hey, we're talking to this point. And to this point, James Conner has won you many a fantasy week.
Now, here's a good stat I like about James Conner. So far through 6 games, he's had 3 games with over 100 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. Le'Veon Bell has never done that even twice in a season, and he's only done it 3 times in his entire career. James Conner has done it 3 times in 6 games.
I wonder if, how much of that is the team saying, we want to stick it to Bell. We want to get James Conner as many points as we possibly can and just say, hey, look here, Le'Veon, look what we're doing. Look at this guy. He can come in and do your job too. I think that offensive line, they're pissed. They didn't like that. They thought he was coming back and he didn't show up. That might be a little part of it, but either way, Conner's having an awesome season. What's your take, Dwayne?
Yeah, I think it's just Conner playing anything I thought he was capable of. I mean, he's one of those guys when you're watching him, he's always got that forward lean. He's always getting those extra yards. He's excited to be on the field. I think there's probably some truth to what Brian, was just saying, thinking about, that offensive line really blocking well for him. But I mean, to me, it's not so much them force feeding it. It's just he's taking advantage of his opportunities. I mean, when he gets in the open field, he's willing to put his head down, run over the next guy, which is supposed to be a penalty. But hey, who's counting these days?
Yeah, they're not calling that penalty at all.
And what's man, just how well he's done in the passing game. He's been great too. So, and I think like you said, Jim, down around the goal line, he's actually better than Bell. He's just a guy that's just more hard-nosed. He's just going to get it in there. Maybe that's one area where Bell, that patience that we all grew to love so much could actually hurt you, down in the red zone at times. And that's just something that, like you said, he hasn't been able to put the type of production up that Conner has.
Yeah, he's a true north-south runner when it comes to it. When you're in that red zone, I agree. Here's definitely something you want to see.
Question for you, Jim. Say Le'Veon Bell comes back and he's back in a week or 2. Okay. Now we've got Conner and Lev Bell on the same team. The Steelers know that Bell, 99% chance, is not going to be there next year. What if they say, all right, every time we're in close, it's just James Conner. James Conner's our goal line back. And they split carries and he gets all the touchdowns. And it just makes, and they just say, like, you know what, Le'Veon Bell, we're just going to screw all your stats for you and your agent when you're trying to negotiate a deal next year, even though he'll still get paid. But I could totally see them doing that. I'm saying, like, nope, we're in the 1. Conner, you're in. Love, get out.
And it's very possible. But you know what? The range of outcomes that could happen between these 2 guys with this team is so varied, it isn't funny. There's talk that maybe he's back next Monday. Who knows? We just don't have a clue. There's also a chance that when he does come back, the team puts him on the player exempt list and doesn't want him in the locker room. let's face it, this team is playing well with Connor. Won the last 2 games. They're climbing back into the division. If they continue to win the next couple of games without Bell, maybe they don't want to disrupt that flow and they put Bell on the exempt list, and we don't see Bell anymore. It's just so hard to know what happens. I'm always of the fact that if you got Bell and this is the last year he's with you, he's not going to be back next year. And at this point, you can't really believe they're going to sign him to any kind of a long-term contract. I just can't see it. But they could easily just turn their backs on him completely and just say, screw it. You didn't want to play the first half of the year. We don't want you to play the second half of the year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the potential different outcomes, like you say, it's a very wide range. I'm personally hoping that Bell comes back and gets in the mix, not because I own Bell, but because I just don't own Connor enough.
Well, there you go. I said this a lot before the season. I really had a bad feeling about Bell coming into the season and thinking that he really did want to prove his point that he wanted to get paid. He would hold out as long as he had to get that done. And ultimately it came to fruition. So out of 173 teams, I absolutely own Bell nowhere. I don't have him on a single team.
Did you manage Connor then?
I'm sorry?
Did you manage to get some James Conner then?
I have 16 copies of James Conner right now.
There you go. That's good.
So, I mean, not the greatest number, but, I like it. I'm okay with it. It's in some of the bigger leagues, so that works out well for me. And in, I think 7 or 8 of them, they were waiver wire pickups. So I love that. Okay, let's go on to – and I for my fantasy MVP, I had to say Pat Mahomes too. Look, most people like Dwayne was saying, you got him so late, and a lot of times as a QB too. If you draft 2 QBs, he was definitely a backup type of QB. Outplaying all of the starters at this point, saved you so many rounds. He's averaging over 30 points a game. He's the number 1 overall scorer in fantasy. He's got more touchdowns. He's done more touchdowns, 20 total touchdowns, than 24 different teams have total. And, when you look at that, Buffalo and Tennessee only have 7 touchdowns as a team each. He's accounted for 20 on his own. So to me, that's fantasy MVP right there. I get what you're saying about James Conner, but Pat Mahomes, I mean, we all knew he was going to be a gunslinger, but we all expected him to throw a ton of interceptions as well. Get that Brett Favre type thing going on where he's throwing the ball downfield and half of going the other team, half going in his team. And, after that outstanding start, we've seen him throw 4 interceptions the last 2 weeks. Maybe he's pressing a little bit now to keep that big flow going. But, he has just played outstanding. So I am all up in that. Let's go move on. The next one is Fantasy Bust. Brian, give us your Fantasy Bust.
Well, it's 2 guys who are going to share this title, and it's the Tennessee Titans backfield between Derrick Henry and Dion Lewis. So Derrick Henry has 240 yards rushing through 6 games, 0 touchdowns. Dion Lewis, not to be outdone, also has 0 touchdowns and 1 game with over 3 catches. This was supposed to be this dynamic offense coming in with LaFleur calling these all exotic plays, and we were going to see Dion Lewis catching passes out of the backfield, and Henry's running people over. Mariota's using all of his abilities finally, and they're just garbage. That offense looks like it's going backwards. So I don't want any piece of these 2 guys. I've traded away any piece of Dion Lewis that I had. My fantasy bust, Tennessee Titans backfield.
I can't argue that point at all. I mean, I did expect, I didn't expect much from Derrick Henry. I was never a believer, didn't draft him anywhere. I did expect Dion Lewis to do a little bit more than what he's doing, though. So I definitely get that. How about you, Dwayne?
Yeah, I mean, my group's even more expansive. So hopefully, this may hit some of yours, Jim. But any running back that you took from round 2, 3, and 4, other than like Joe Mixon. So Jordan Howard has been a bust. Obviously, Jarrett McKinnon, if you drafted early, he got hurt. Kenyon Drake, Alex Collins, Derrick Henry, Dion Lewis at times. That whole slew of 3rd, 4th round running backs, 2nd, 3rd, 4th round running backs I mean, think about it. You don't feel comfortable starting any of those. You can't even get in your lineup, and you paid a premium draft pick for them. So I consider all of those guys busts, and I think that's something that, I didn't feel comfortable with many of them, so I don't own a lot of them. I was taking receivers in those rounds, but it just cements in my mind, going back to if I don't really feel good about a situation or don't know for sure, if there's, especially at that price tag when there's so many other options you feel good about and you know what their role is going to be in an offense, just avoid it.
Yeah, easy said than done. Sometimes, I mean, look here. I'm going to give you my fantasy bust, and that's Larry Fitzgerald. I think some of it's due to health, but the other part of it is he's just not getting it done. They're not getting the ball to him. So far in the season, he's the number 67 wide receiver. He's averaging 7.25 fantasy points a game in a PPR league. Are you kidding me? That's just nuts. He's only top 9 points one time, and that was back in week 1. That last year at this point, he was the number 3 wide receiver, averaging over 17 points a game. In 2016, he was the number 6, averaging over 18 points a game. With all bad quarterbacks for the most part, he's always gotten it done. So, is he finally done? Is it this the end for Larry Fitzgerald? I mean, I know he's got a bad quarterback situation again, but he's done it so often with bad quarterbacks before. And I'll lead you, Brian, with this. What do you think about Larry Fitzgerald? Any chance he has of bouncing back?
It's all about health. If he's not healthy, no. If he comes back into health and he's still playing out of the slot, I think there's a chance. Obviously, Rosen and Kirk have a really nice chemistry right now, but the line's bad. They're not running many plays. It's just not a good atmosphere. But plus, too, if he's not healthy, that's the main thing. Bad hamstring. For a guy that's playing in the slot and needs to win quickly, it's not going to happen for Larry Fitzgerald, I don't think, this year.
How about you, Dwayne? Anything to add?
No, I mean, I think Brian, pretty much hit it on the head. He's getting the volume, that you want. It's just, the rookie quarterback thing can just be deadly. And, they're just struggling to run any plays. They're running the least plays in the league. I think they're averaging 50 plays a game. So even when you're getting 25, 28%, of the market share, this week he did bounce back and was healthy and played the majority of his time in the slot. Kirk kicked back outside. So those are, and Larry's going to always work. He's a big professional, but whenever your offense just isn't running enough plays and there's no innovation going on within your offense to move you around and create opportunities for you, especially when defenses are keying on you, I think it's just going to be, even if he's getting the catches, it's just hard for him to do anything with them. And that also potentially leads to more injury, all the hits and everything he's having to take.
Yep, I'm with you there. And I hate it because he's he's been a big part of a lot of my championships over the years. Always been a huge fan of the guy. He never complains, never whines, just goes out there and plays his game. And you just got to love players like that. And I hope it's not the end all time. Hopefully, maybe it's just the injury this year and he bounces back next year. Still in great shape. So we'll have to see how that pans out. Before we go on to our next segment, though, we got a couple of questions in the chat room that I want to bring up. So Mendo Bruce, he wants to know, he needs to drop one of Andrew Luck or Carson Wentz. Doesn't give us a reason why he needs to drop one, but he needs to drop one. Let's just take it on the question's face. That's the question. You have to drop one, Andrew Luck or Carson Wentz. I'll start with you, Dwayne. Don't laugh, just answer.
I'm going to drop Wentz just because the volume that Luck is seeing every single week. Luck's going to throw more picks, but Luck's to be given more chances, I think, to air it out and just keep doing his thing. And his team's only going to get healthier. And that's hard to answer because I love.
How about you, Brian?
This is the Eagles fan.
Yeah, I know that's what I went to.
Here's what there's two ways to look at this. Number one, obviously Luck is throwing the ball a lot more, right? Because his defense is terrible, his team stinks. Is what Wentz doing though of better quality? Is he because he's throwing to better players, and they have more sustained drives. I mean, at this point, Luck has thrown double the amount of touchdowns, but Wentz has played, probably half as many games. So they're very, very even. I'm just going to say, in terms of pure team on team talent, I'm going to take Carson Wentz because he's also going to get it done with his legs, and I just think he has more weapons.
Homer.
I don't care. Well, I mean, what league are you in, buddy? That you got to drop one of these two.
Yeah, Mendo, please give us a reason why you have to drop one of those two guys.
Tell me, who's he picking up? Doug Martin?
Yeah, really. and that's the craziness about trying to answer these questions. Sometimes you get one little snippet of information, definitely never enough to give a full answer. But Sean Willis, he wants to know. I'm sorry, what?
Oh, go ahead. Okay, we're good. I was just saying it is definitely like Brian says. I mean, points per game, one of them's Luck's at 22 and Wentz is at 21. I mean,
yeah, I mean, they're right there. There's no doubt about it. But the other side of the coin is trying to figure out which one to start every week is a pain anyway.
Yeah.
Because it's so close, you're going to probably be wrong half the time.
Well, that's like because his defense is terrible. Like Philly's defense hasn't been good, but I see it coming around, whereas Luck's just going to have to throw it, and they don't have any running game. So from a fantasy perspective, that's why I lean that way.
Okay, folks, you're watching the WTF Fantasy Football Podcast. Brian Drake, special guest Dwayne McFarland, and me, Jim Day, the Fantasy Taz. Hey, guys, why don't you share your Twitter accounts with everybody so they can follow you on Twitter?
Sure, you can follow me at Drake Fantasy. Dwayne and I do a show on Tuesday nights called the Tuesday Night Hustle. If you can check us out at fightingchancefantasy.com. Jim Day is writing fantastic stuff there, really good waiver wire column. Dwayne's writing a fantastic late week article, but go over there and check us out. There's a podcast tab, and you can go see what Dwayne and I do on Tuesday nights. If you really like what we do here on Wednesdays, you might like what we're doing on Tuesday. So Drake Fantasy on Twitter, fightingchancefantasy.com. Go check us out. It's a really good site. A lot of smart people doing good things.
How about you, Dwayne?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at Dwayne McFarland, and so it's just DWAINMCFARLAND, and just I'll go with everything Brian just said.
There you go. And I will say I've listened to the Tuesday Night Podcast quite a few times, and definitely a lot of great information there, folks. So, if that's your thing, if you're here to get great information, that's a podcast you want to listen to. Okay, we got a couple more questions coming in. Sean Willis wants to know, he needs 2 RBs out of this in a PPR, and his choices are between Nyheim Hines, Clement, Ito Smith, and Lat Murray. And I'll start with you this time, Dwayne. Which 2 running backs in a PPR do you like in this group?
Is this just for the week or easy?
Yeah, just for the week, yes.
Okay. Yeah, for this week, I'm going with Ito and Clement. So for me, personally, just with Hines' role being reduced, with Matt coming back last week, and even Turbin seeing time on the field, I like him in a PPR. I like him still to catch balls, but I like the other 2. I love Ito's role. I mean, last week he had 50% of the carries, so he actually out carried Tevin Coleman, and honestly looked better than Tevin Coleman. So I think Ito's got to be in the mix. If he just felt torn about Hines, and Clement, then I suppose he could go towards Hines instead. But I personally would go with Clement and Ito Smith.
How about you, Brian? Anything different to add?
No, I'm going to go with those same 2 guys, and they're the 2 most likely to score a touchdown. And also, Dalvin Cook practiced fully today, so Lat Murray might not even play any kind of role. So, yeah, go with the 2 guys who are going to get the most action and score the most and sleep like a baby.
Okay, well, I'm just going to throw this point out there. Cook practiced in full last week at this time, too. Didn't play. If he doesn't play, I'm putting Murray in there. Look, I like Ito Smith. I think he gets somewhere at some point. I'm just not sure if he's going to be, that bell cow back. I think he's going to be really dependent on getting those, touchdowns. And he's done well in that regard so far, but it's almost like he's done so well that the regression is bound to happen. So he's a little scary to me. I'm not buying in as much as other people are just yet. You mentioned he looked better than Coleman, but I wouldn't say that's great. I mean, yards per carry, not doing well that way. He's really so far been totally dependent on the touchdowns. I'm not a big fan of picking people that are totally dependent on touchdowns because they are so variable from week to week. So that bothers me a little bit. So for me personally, if Cook plays, then yeah, I don't like Lat Murray in this one. Clement, got the pass catching downs last week, got the touchdown. I'd probably put him in, But I can't complain about that. Clement, Ito Smith, not bad. Hines, like you said, down a little tougher. But with especially with Hilton coming back this week, or it looks like Hilton might come back this week, Hines' role probably gets reduced even a little bit more. So Clement and Ito Smith, I guess we'll all agree, as long as Cook plays.
Yeah, I'm totally. If
Go
Murray
ahead.
goes, gotta have him in. Yeah, if Murray goes, absolutely gotta have him in. You're right, Jim. I totally forgot that last week at this time that Dalvin Cook did have a full practice, and then he came back and didn't play. So good catch by you.
Yeah, so you just got to be a little careful. Make sure you watch the injury reports. Make sure you watch the practice reports for the next couple of days. Thursday and Fridays are definitely key when it comes to that. We'll see if he has any kind of setback this week like he did last week. Roger Wells wants to know 1 point PPR. He needs to start 2 of these 4. Aguilar, Jerome Curse, Kiki Kute, or Uzama, the tight end from Cincinnati. And I'll start with you this time, Dwayne. Which one of these 2? Which 2 of these 4 do you want to play? Jeez.
Yeah, I'm going with Curse for sure, with assuming Anunua is going to high ankle sprain. He was playing the slot last week almost all of the time, and he's the one that had the targets shoot through the roof when Anunua left. And so Anunua has been between 25 and 30% of the targets each week. So I think that's money in the bank. Not always the best targets, not the best offense, but we're kind of dealing with some similar guys here. Aguilar's role's really been reduced with Alshon Jeffrey returning to health. So he really scares me. Now they're throwing deeper to him now, but it's like, hey, 3 or 4 targets and you better catch a deep one or you're kind of, you're going to be screwed. So Kute would be my next one. So I would go with him just because playing the Jaguars, you're likely to have Jalen Ramsey on the outside against Hopkins. Not that anyone can stop Hopkins. He's going to get his targets. But Kuti is the guy that I think in the slot could really work well. And you saw Cole Beasley destroy the slot cornerback last week for the Jaguars. So that would be my 2.
Yes, especially with Will Fuller obviously not being 100%. They keep trotting him out there. You can see the difference. He's not the explosive player he was before the injury. So I get that. I like Uzuma too. I'll be honest with you, just because he is the man now with Croft also out, and we know that Dalton loves to throw to his tight end. But I'm with you. Curse would be first for me automatically based on playing in the slot. Any slot producer in that Jets offense is producing right now. And I would probably go Kuti this week just because, Fuller not there. Like you said, they tore up Jacksonville's slot cornerback last week. I think they try to do that again. How about you, Brian? Anything different to add?
No, Beasley went 9 for 101 and 2 touchdowns. That's an easy one. We can move on.
Okay. Let's see. Eddie A wants to know, should you deal Kerryon Johnson for either Allen Robinson or Edelman
yes.
in a PPR league?
Kerryon Johnson, I believe does he have a little ankle injury or something going on right now? He's a little nicked up, but either way, I don't trust him at all. If I can get Allen Robinson for him and I'm looking for a wide receiver, I think that's a solid move. I would do that if you have enough depth. Obviously, I don't think Kerryon Johnson is your RB1 or 2, so you can feel free moving him, whereas Allen Robinson would become probably your wide receiver 2 or 3. So that's a move I would make.
How about you, Dwayne?
I would absolutely do it. And did you say Edelman was the other
option? I was waiting to say that, but yeah, Edelman was the other option. Yeah, sorry, Brian, you're out the door. Edelman is the pick. If you can get Edelman for him, I'd do that in a heartbeat. Look, I like Allen Robinson. I really do. But Edelman with Brady, these two just connect too well.
Well, but Dwayne, you actually wrote something of this the other day, how their target share now is so diverse in New England. Gronk's numbers are down. Edelman's numbers are down. You're adding White, you're adding Michelle, you're adding Gordon. I haven't seen in the game or so that Edelman's been back. I mean, there's a lot of games to be played, but I mean, he doesn't look like anything that special that he's going to be scoring that many touchdowns where Robinson might.
Yeah, well, the thing is, they're both similar. They're both offenses that are going to attack what you allow them to attack. So their game plan when they come in is not to force it anywhere. It's to see what's the defense going to do, and then they're going to go with whatever you give them. So I think Edelman's still going to have his 30% target share weeks that are going to be coming. The problem that I'm seeing with Allen Robinson, is that he's running into the same thing, and he doesn't have a quarterback like Tom Brady. So if I have to go with a tiebreaker, it's not that I don't like Allen Robinson. I would just go with Edelman because I know Brady has that as the season goes on and they're in the playoff race. I see him just leaning towards Edelman, especially when he needs to. Now Josh Gordon came in last week and led the team in targets. He had 26% of the targets. So I think that it is going to be a very evenly distributed offense. But again, Julian Edelman, he's played that role before, and it's still been good. So I think it's definitely, it's a close call. But I just like the Patriots. I trust the Patriots offense, I guess, for the long term a little more than I would the Bears. So I think they're both going to be similar in their target shares. I just like the Patriot offense a little bit better.
Yeah, and like you say, the trust in Brady is a hell of a lot bigger than the trust in Trubisky at this point, even though Trubisky's had 2 good games in a row. So I agree. Miley Robert wants to know, Winston this week going up against, just had it in my head, Cleveland. Or Breeze going on the road to Baltimore. Which one you like there? You buying into Winston and being an every week starter now, Dwayne?
Yeah, I love Winston. I think he's a top 8 quarterback probably the rest of the way, but I'm never going to start him over Drew Brees. I'm just not.
Yeah.
I mean, I've played those games in the past. If I own a stud like Brees and I invest the pick, I'm just going to play him every week. I may miss here or there, and I know Brees on the road. So if you're a big, person that buys into these on the road versus at home stats, which I know for Ben and for Breeze, those are the 2 guys that people talk about a lot. You could talk yourself into Winston, but Cleveland's been a pretty scrappy defense, so I don't know that I look for them to just completely roll over for the Bucs. My guess is there will be a lot of points scored, in both games. It's not like the Ravens defense has really been playing that well other than the huge sacks they had last week playing no one. So I think I'm just sticking with Breeze. Now, I haven't looked at the weather. I don't know what the weather's supposed to be like in those 2 games. So if I had a coin flip, I would definitely look at the weather, and whichever game had the better weather, then I would go that way.
And I'll tell you this, this is what Vegas thinks. The Cleveland-Tampa Bay game is currently at an over-under of 50, while the New Orleans-Baltimore game is currently at an over-under of 49.5. So they're expecting, implied outcomes pretty close to the same from both of these teams. Yeah, and I'm with you. I can't sit Breeze. If you drafted Breeze, you got to play him every week. And, there will be some downtimes just like any other player in the NFL. So, but he's your guy. You got to stick with him. How about you, Brian? Anything different?
I'm taking Jameis Winston. I'd play Winston.
He's taking Winston.
Like we said, it's a game in Florida. They're at home versus the Saints, who are on the road. The Ravens have a really good secondary. Now that Jimmy Smith's back, they have probably the 2 best safeties in the NFL. Winston's throwing it. He completed 30 passes last week for almost 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. Again, they played Atlanta. I get that. But this is a team whose defense can't stop anybody. So let's say Baker Mayfield marches up and down the field, puts points up. Jameis is going to have to try to match him. Jameis has fantastic weapons. And the one thing, his team can't run the ball. Whereas I think the Saints, if they have the lead in the second half, they're going to grind it with Mark Ingram. Jameis, that's not happening. They're throwing the ball 1,000 times on Sunday. So, I think he's going to put up better stats. I'm playing Jameis Winston this week.
Well, there you go, folks. Brian says Jameis. Dwayne and I are both on Breeze. And, just because he's Breeze. Sorry, guys. It is what it is. Okay, that seems up. No, we got one more. Roger Wells. He's got a 6-0 dynasty team. Kudos, Roger. Good for you. He made a trade today. He needed a backup tight end behind Rudolph. So he gave away a 2019 first and Anthony Miller for David Njoku. Ooh, man. Now, the Miller part, I can take or leave it. I think eventually he'll be a good slot receiver. I'm not sure he's ever going to be anything really special. 2019 first could be something good, but you never know. Look, at this point, if I'm taking David Njoku, he might very well end up being my number 1 over Rudolph, who has become so touchdown dependent and just not seeing a ton of them. How about you, Brian?
I know there's a thought out there that in dynasty leagues, it's sometimes better to trade for proven commodities than to hoard draft picks. But I don't really like that trade at all. I'd rather have the one and Anthony Miller. I'd like to see that offense evolve, and he should be a big piece of it, considering they traded up to get him. And with the one, who knows what you get. If he's that good, it sounds like it'll be a later draft pick anyways. But I don't know. I think you can find somebody else out there cheaper than David Njoku. There's got to be. Go get CJ Uzuma for like way less than that, just for this year.
Well, he already made the trade, so
I don't like it.
He's trying to ask us what we think. So there you go. Brian says, you made a bad trade. Sorry, Roger. Okay, so let's keep going on with the show. Here's the next thing we're going to talk about. Who's been a bust so far this year that you expect to break out in the second half? I'll go first this time because I've been picking on you two guys. I'm going with my guys. So I got to stick with him. Mr. Dalvin Cook, man. I just want to see this guy on the field so freaking bad, but I also want them to wait till he's fully freaking healthy first. This keep trying to trot him out at not 100%. Him keep hurting himself, just keep pissing me off, and I'm just going to go out to Minnesota and strangle somebody one of these days. But I need Dalvin Cook. I have Dalvin Cook in way too many leagues now when I look back on it. I really expected him to take off this year, but man, I still expect him. If he can get fully healthy, you're going to see Dalvin Cook take off. I like him a lot. First 4 weeks last year, he was the number 9 running back, averaging almost 17 points a game. Had a couple of big games thrown in there. I think he just has so much talent, and with so many other weapons on that team, I think defenses just can't crowd that box if they can never get a running game going. I know the offensive line isn't the best. Well, definitely not the best, not even close. But I just think this kid has amazing talent, and I just want to see him on the field. Any thoughts on Cook from either of you?
Oh, Dalvin. The biggest league that I have, I took Dalvin Cook 10 overall, and I'm currently 0-6 in this league. It's been brutal, and I've gotten a lot of trade offers for him, and I'm just like, I can't do it. I'm going to hold this guy. I said I was going to draft him in June when I found out my pick. I've got him, and this guy's going to come through for me, but I'm also very concerned about the hamstring. He and Fournette, both with the bad hammies. It worries me, especially with the ACL injury. That seems like it kind of goes hand in hand. One more setback, and I think I'm bailing. I'm selling him. And he's like that unicorn people will buy for no matter what. So I'm with you, man. I hope he comes through, Jim. Please. I'm lighting a candle over here in Syracuse.
Okay, Dwayne, how about for you? Who do you think bounces back in the second half of the year after a rough start?
Yeah, I think at runner, you nailed it. Cook would be the person I would have said. So let's go to receiver now. And I would say that's T.Y. Hilton, another guy that's been injured, but going back to Andrew Luck and just thinking of the volume that this offense is producing. I mean, they're running a ton of plays per game. Luck's looking better and better. And I mean, T.Y. is clearly the best player they have. Now, obviously, he's going to have to stay healthy. But this is a guy that, what was it, 2 seasons ago? Or maybe it was 3. But he led the league in receiving yards with Andrew Luck healthy. So I think he's a guy that can definitely come in. And if you got him in the 3rd round of your draft, which is where he went in a lot of the higher stake leagues that I was in, sometimes you see him go in the 2nd. I mean, that's a guy that if you hit on your first 2 rounds, you're going to be feeling really, really good about T.Y. Hilton and what he's doing for your team.
Yeah, I can't argue that. I'm definitely looking for Hilton to bounce back in a big way. The injury has been a big detriment so far. We were more worried about Luck, getting injured, that we weren't really thinking about Hilton getting injured and kind of hit us on the back door. So I'm there with you. How about you, Brian? Who's your bust to star?
Well, we spoke about him a little bit earlier, and this is Jack Doyle from the Indianapolis Colts. He's been out since week 2. And now you look at what Eric Ebron's done in that time. 6 touchdowns. 30 receptions on 52 targets. Those are Jack Doyle's targets. Last year, Doyle had 108 targets, 80 catches, and scored 4 touchdowns. So if he can come in and get...
But with a different quarterback.
Right, with a terrible quarterback. So now you've got Andrew Luck in there, and we know they've got a little rapport from a few years back. I really like Jack Doyle. I'm sure he's on some waiver wires out there. People are sick of him, but we just can't get a word out about what this injury is. And I blame these crappy beat writers in Indianapolis. You've got to be able to get in there and find out what the hell's going on. There's a few teams like that in the NFL. Cleveland's bad, Indy's bad, where you just don't know what's going on, and nobody can get in there and ask a question.
New England gets into that mix too, because everybody on New England is questionable every week. So you never know. Yeah, it's craziness. But yeah, I don't. Hey, look, I love Doyle too. I was also high on Ebron coming into the season. I liked them both, to be honest with you, but more because I really expected them to run a ton of 12 personnel, given that the wide receiver core that they have. But Ryan Grant is quietly, up until the injury, was quietly very solid, giving you double-digit points almost every week. Chester Rogers has stepped in since Hilton has gone down and played pretty well, at least fantasy-wise, put up good fantasy points for you. So, it's been doing better. And, of course, Ebron has just been amazing because Doyle has been out. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. So let's keep going. Oh, man, I only got 15 minutes left. Crazy. Things go so fast. Okay, so Dwayne, I'll start with you. Who's a great buy low candidate? And I happen to hear from Brian that you're a really big fan of air yards, and supposedly air yards is supposed to be able to predict who we should buy low on, shouldn't it?
It should. No, I mean, I like air yards. I don't look at it as the end all be all. I think you have to have the context, of targets as well as.
Thank you. Finally, somebody who admits that. Crap.
Oh, no, you need that context. And the reason why is because the extreme ends of the scale throw you off. For example, it'll make you think a receiver that had 3 targets that reached 40-yard bombs at the end of a game all of a sudden looks good and you should target him, when that's not a high success rate play, versus, it'll make someone that maybe had 8 targets at only 3 or 4 yards, but it could be very valuable in fantasy, like, say, a Jarvis Landry last year. It can make him look bad. So overall, it can be a nice metric to use. I still like to have the context of it overall. But since you went to air yards, I mean, and I guess going here, I don't know if this would be my number one guy, but this definitely triggered, Corey Davis is everything for the Titans offense. He's getting all the targets. I can't say that that's worth a ton. I'm not huge on Marcus Mariota right now, but Corey Davis definitely has talent. They're moving him all over the field. That is a team that I have watched most of the games just to go and see. And it's not for lack of trying by the offensive coordinator. I do think the pace is being enforced by Vrabel. What we really need to see for that team is for him to, they were winning some games they shouldn't have won early in the season. And I think now he's starting to see, oh, crap, here's what my team really is. And they may need to open it up a little bit more. Like you guys both said, Derrick Henry's doing nothing right now. And what's the better way to use Deion Lewis? Well, to get him out into space, let him catch balls. And if they start doing that, they have some concepts where they're getting Corey Davis open. They're running schemes to get him there. They just need to be running more plays as an offense. So if that offense can go from, say, a 50 to a 60 or 65 plays per game, even if Mariota isn't playing that great, now those two things go hand in hand. Can't play terrible quarterback and get enough plays. So Corey Davis would be a guy for me that would definitely be on the list. If I can go to someone and get him for cheap, he's only had his one big game, but everything else about him has been the same. His target share is up around 30 every week. He's getting targeted down the field. He gets targeted underneath. So I love everything about Corey Davis other than Marcus Mariota.
And here, this is my biggest bugaboo about air yards. If you look at air yards this year, the number 12th wide receiver in air yards is Antonio Callaway.
Yeah.
Air yards doesn't tell you if the guy's any good or not. It just says they keep throwing the ball to him, hoping that eventually it's going to stick in his helmet or something. So yeah, I don't know. It's like you said, it's one little piece of a puzzle that people are using in too broad a scope as far as I'm concerned. A lot of guys just use that as a big guide to them. I'm okay with it if you use it as one little piece of a puzzle, but not as a be-all, end-all. To me, that's just nuts. Okay, go ahead.
No, I agree. I just was going to say, I think there are voices out in the community that really are trying to push their own agenda of making sure that stat, is heard. So it gets a bit overboard. I'm with you. It's just a piece of the puzzle.
Well, and this is what I went through this with Mike Clay way back in the day. He and I, I had him on my podcast quite a lot in the early days when trying to get him out there because I just knew he was doing really good stuff and wanted to get his voice heard. But him and I used to have big debates about his stat ADOT, average depth of target. And, we talk about it. And at that time, he was doing fantasy more than he was doing NFL stuff. So I kept telling him, tell me how ADOT helps me predict fantasy football. What players can I glean from the knowledge ADOT gives me that makes it worth my while to use ADOT as something we can glean good and solid information from? And they just couldn't do it. It's just, it's one little piece of a puzzle, but, looking at numbers isn't the only thing that's ever going to get it done. If you're not watching games, if you're not really seeing what's going on in the field, there's so much you're going to miss by just looking at numbers. And a lot of those guys just look at numbers. So it just kind of sets me off the wrong way. Okay, so now if you're trying to trade for him, what are you looking to give up to get him?
Yeah, so if I'm trying to trade for Corey Davis, most likely, I'm looking at him to be a flex player for me, potentially a wide receiver too if I'm in a really tough spot. So I'm looking to trade something like, maybe one of my backup running backs to a team that's, needy for that if that's what I have. Or maybe even doing something that's more, along the lines of what we just heard from the last person that wrote in, if it's something where I've got a tight end, and because this year is a wasteland at tight ends, it's literally the have and have nots. Like when you look around your leagues, you'll see, there's 6 teams that have tight ends, and then there are 6 teams that have none. Yeah. So I've actually been able to have some luck in some of my leagues this year with trading tight ends, which is not normal, but it's just because, the supply and the demand thing is so off kilter this year. That's another way that you could approach it. So, I think he's low enough right now. You just find the owner that has Corey Davis and you look for where their weakness is. And if the roster construction works with the way your roster is created and you can give to them out of strength, that's just the way I typically look at it. So it's not like a certain player per se I would be looking at. It all depends on roster construction.
And I will say this, tight ends this year have been abysmal. The big names for the most part, even Gronk's not having a great year. And it kind of pissed me off the other night watching the game, how often they actually kept Gronk in to block. He was blocking an awful lot in that game as opposed to running routes. And that just doesn't make any sense to me. Can't you bring in a backup guard or something to give that line a little extra help and get Gronk into the routes? I'm a Gronk guy, and it just pissed me off. I don't want to see him blocking. Don't let him block. Get him out there and run. Yep. Brian, how about you? Who's a good buy low candidate, and who are you trying to sell to get him?
Well, I think a great buy low candidate right now, and I don't know why we're talking about so many Colts, but I think it's T.Y. Hilton. This is a guy who, when healthy, is usually a second, third round pick in most redrafts. And right now, his owner has sat on him for, basically the entire season and not gotten anything for him. So T.Y. Hilton, when healthy in this offense that has basically just Eric Ebron, can put up, insane DeAndre Hopkins like target numbers. And that's what we're looking for in a guy who's coming basically from nowhere. We can say, oh my God, this guy can become my wide receiver 1. And I think you can probably get him for, a high-end a high-end running back 2 type. Say maybe you go to the guy and he's weak at running back. You got a Chris Carson type. You've got a James White. I think those kind of guys can get T.Y. Hilton to your team, and he's
James
a guy
White,
he's healthy, can
Chris
win.
Carson, I wouldn't trade Hilton for Chris Carson. Sorry,
I'm just saying that's the kind of guy. If you got a high end, kind of a running back 2, if someone came and said, "Hey, I'll give you James White for him," maybe what I love to do is get guys off the waiver wire, even if you don't need them, but they're the hot name, and try to move them that week. Like I'm sending out trades offers all day long now with Ito Smith in them because everybody thinks Ito Smith is the hottest thing going. So if I say, hey, here's Chris Carson and Ito Smith. Like I'll 2 for 1 them for you, and then you can go back to the waiver wire and pick up, just keep stockpiling tight ends. Like Dwayne said, great point. And sooner or later, these guys are going to hit. If Doyle's out there, somebody dropped Greg Olsen a few weeks ago. Keep stockpiling these guys, keep churning, and that's going to work. But T.Y. Hilton, he's my buy low guy. I think he can be a real difference maker in the second half of the season.
Okay, I'm going to go with Jordan Howard. I'm still a Jordan Howard believer. The fumble last week hurt him. I think they eventually need to reestablish a ground game. Tariq Cohen is good, but I think he's still more that third down, change of pace back. Howard is going to be that grind him out goal line back. I definitely look for him to bounce back big. Right now, he's the number 36 running back in the league. In a PPR league. So if I'm trying to get Howard, for me right now, Tevin Coleman is a great person to trade. I would trade him for Howard in a heartbeat right now. I don't expect Coleman to be the big name in Atlanta for long at all. He hasn't shown that capability yet. So I'd much rather have Howard at this point than Coleman. So I'm looking to make that trade. Coleman has a very tough schedule ahead. He's got Washington, Dallas, New Orleans, Baltimore, all tough teams against the run. Just going to hurt his value. And now with Ito Smith coming on, a lot of people expecting Ito to take on a much bigger role. I think Coleman just gets pushed out even further. So I would absolutely look to get a Jordan Howard with somebody like a Tevin Coleman. I would actually try to tell Tevin Coleman anywhere you can right now. If anybody's out there buying, go sell him. We got a couple minutes left, so let's do this real quick. We'll go to a sell high candidate, and I'll start with you, Dwayne. Who's your sell high candidate for right now? Who are you looking for?
Yeah, so I'm looking to sell any of your wide receiver 3-4s that come out and have a big week, like Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin gets 50% of the snaps. He gets 5% of the targets one week, 20% the next week. So basically, anytime a guy like that comes out and has a week where he scores or does something, Robbie Anderson did it 2 weeks ago, and then look, this last week it was back to nothing. So I'm always looking for those kind of guys that I have on my roster where I know whatever they're doing is not sustainable because they're just not on the field enough, or they're not seeing enough pass routes. They're not being targeted enough. They're clearly not a big part of the offense. It just so happens that they came through for a week. So, I think there's multiple players that, you could put on that list, but I think Chris Godwin is one right now that I look at and I think, man, this guy is going to come back. He's going to continue to come back down to earth. It's going to be a roller coaster. You're never going to feel comfortable about getting him in there, but he's one of those names that for whatever reason, like what Brian was saying earlier, people love him because he is a good athlete. He's a good player. He plays well in the red zone. He's on an offense that's scoring points, but at the end of the day, they have too many other weapons to feed. And there's just not going to be enough balls to go around despite how good he is. If Deshaun Jackson gets hurt, that changes things. If Adam Humphries gets hurt, that changes things. But that's just a team that, it's just a perfect example of, it's just like any Jags receiver, and they're none of them doing good right now. But remember, Keelan Cole was the big name at the beginning of the year. Oh, Keelan Cole. What Keelan Cole was doing, you knew it wouldn't be able to be sustainable based on the way they were using their other receivers.
Well, the only thing I'm going to say to that with Godwin is, he's getting the red zone opportunities. He's had 8 red zone targets so far on the year, leads the team in red zone targets. So they're absolutely, getting the ball to him down in close, and he's scoring touchdowns. He's got 4 on the season so far. So, I understand what you're saying, but I'm not ready to. I think he can continue. You like Jameis Winston. You both like Jameis Winston a lot, probably more than I do. So I find it interesting that you're saying get rid of him. I'm saying I think I'd rather hold him. Brian, who's your sell high?
This is going to be controversial, and if you own him on your team, you're going to think you're an idiot, Brian. I'm never trading this guy. But here's the thing. You want to maximize value on your fantasy roster. You want to have great players at every position, and this is a player that can get you multiple excellent fantasy players. The reason why, he's coming off a dynamic game on national television. You got to remember in your league, most players in your league don't watch every game. They kind of look at the stats. They've probably never seen the Seattle Seahawks play. They have no clue what's going on. They just see the stats the next morning. I'm telling you right now to go out and sell Tyreek Hill. He went for $142 and 3 touchdowns in the biggest game of the year so far. Before that, he had 3 straight games under 12 points. Go out, get 2 or 3 pieces for Tyreek Hill from some desperate owner right now who's 1-5, 2-4 in your league, and just raid his team of all his good players. And trust me, you'll be set up for the long term. Tyreek Hill is my sell high player this week.
Ooh, any thoughts there, Dwayne?
It's a similar kind of deal. But he's on the field a lot more than Godwin. But yeah, his targets go up and down. And the thing, and it's like with Godwin, when we say sell high on this thing bad, part of it, I wouldn't give him away just for anything. But I think on Tyreek Hill, yeah, I mean, he's not going to have a higher value than right now. I'm not saying that everywhere I own Tyreek Hill, I'm looking to trade in, but I'm open to trade anyone at any time if someone wants to make me the right offer. And so that's the way I look at it. And to Brian's point, the best time to do it is whenever you're coming off a high like what Hill had on a major game against the Patriots, in prime time, everybody saw it. And that's all they think about. It's that recency bias. So, yeah.
Yeah, really, that is definitely a thing. There's no doubt about it. Yeah, you have to be part psychologist to play this game now. Part mathematician, part psychologist to play fantasy football. Never would have thunk it back in my day.
That's why my big team's 0-6.
Yeah. My sell high candidate is we talked about him earlier, but that's Eric Ebron. Love the fact that he's the number 2 tight end right now, averaging over 16 points. I do expect Doyle back soon. I expect those numbers to tumble. I would absolutely sell him high right now for Jimmy Graham. Jimmy Graham's starting to come into his own. Number 8 tight end so far, only averaging 11 points, but he's starting to see more of the field. I really thought he'd be a huge red zone target for Rodgers. We're not seeing that, but we are seeing him being used up and down the field more than we expected him to. So I would sell Ebron right now and go out and get somebody like a Jimmy Graham. Any thoughts from either of you on that?
I think that's a great one. I mean, that's probably the best one we've heard. He's definitely going to come back down to earth. But it's similar, right? The reason he's going to come back down to earth is because he's now going to be on the field the same amount Chris Godwin's going to be on the field. He's going to be targeted in the red zone, to your point. But if he doesn't catch the touchdown, he's going to kill you.
Right.
And so I'm totally with you on it.
This is where you got to be a salesman, because everybody in your league also knows Jack Doyle's probably coming back, and they're going to use that against you in negotiations. Oh, well,
Yeah, but
Doyle's
like you said, we don't know when Doyle's coming back. We haven't really had any kind of update on him, if he's coming back. And Ebron is the number 2 tight end, getting it done each and every week. So
that's the move. You trade Ebron. As soon as you hit accept on the trade offer, you also go and add Jack Doyle.
Yeah.
Like, oh, man, look at this guy.
Too much fun. Well, guys, I want to thank you both for joining me tonight. Dwayne, definitely. Again, Dwayne, tell everybody out there where they can find you, where they can read you, where they can listen to you. Give them all the rundown.
Yeah, sure. So you can read my stuff always on Twitter. So that's at Dwayne McFarland. That's DWAINMCFARLAND. And then you can also find me at Fighting Chance Fantasy. And on there, I write an article later in the week each week. It's called The Late Week Hustle. And then you can also hear us on Tuesday night, myself and Brian on the Tuesday Night Hustle. And then I also do work, and I'll have an article coming out on Amari Cooper later this week on Matt Waldman.
Oh, I hate Amari Cooper.
All right. Well, we'll see.
And I will tell you, folks, on Twitter, Dwayne, the other day I got caught up in his Twitter feed because he kept posting team after team of usage charts and, all of that stuff of how many targets they're seeing, how many plays, how many snaps. Just great information, Dwayne. Thank you for posting that, and keep it up. Brian, give everybody your rundown real quick, although it's similar to Dwayne's for a lot of it.
Yeah. Just follow me on Twitter at Drake Fantasy. And what I like to do is I like to find smart people. So if you follow my Twitter feed, what I'm going to do is I try to search out the great minds of fantasy football on Twitter, and I like to retweet their.
That just blows your theory right out of the freaking water.
But I like to retweet a lot of good stuff. So not everybody knows who all those good guys are yet. So follow me. I like to retweet a lot of good stuff that I read out there. That's exactly how I found our friend Dwayne. I said, this guy's doing fantastic work out there. More people need to know about what this young man's up to. So yeah, follow me and check out our show over at fightingchancefantasy.com, the Tuesday Night Hustle. You'll get a lot smarter. Lord knows I have. Check us out here every Wednesday night. And we thank you so much, Jim. This is a fantastic show. We appreciate the opportunity.
Hey, no problem, guys. Thanks for being on with me. And again, we'll talk to you next week. And Dwayne, keep up the great work, man. You definitely getting yourself noticed out there.
All right. Thanks for having me on, Jim. Really appreciate it.
No problem. Good night, all.